Welcome to 2819. I'm Sandra Dimas.
And I'm Daniel Almaguer.
And today's topic is on Christianity among other worldviews.
That's always a good question because people are always wondering, what's the right one? What should I believe in? So it should be a good episode.
Yeah, just to kind of how to engage a variety of worldviews and how do they compare.
Right. In today's Everyday Apologetics, we'll hear from Cynthia Cheung on how worldviews affect scientific development.
And in Science Faith Connection, Jeff Swarink will talk with Hugh Ross about whether science can test the truth of a religion. That's a good question. We'll see.
First up will be Culture Talk. Sandra will be interviewing Dr. Alan Tai on the common ground between Christianity and Eastern religions. So let's go ahead and check it out.
Welcome to Culture Talk, where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. I'm Sandra Dimas, and I'm joined today with Dr. Alan Tai. You are a scientist in the medical ultrasound field. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited. Now, I know that you're originally from Hong Kong, so we're going to be kind of pulling from your experience having grown up in Hong Kong. And we want to talk about the topic of how we can find common ground between Christianity and Eastern religions. So if you can just give us a quick kind of synopsis of what does the worldview perspective or landscape look like in Hong Kong?
Well, first we need to understand Hong Kong was a unique position. People call it East meet West because at one point in time it was under the British colony, and then it turned over to mainland China in 1997. And so in order to understand the historical reason, how right now Christianity is the number one religion, 15% of the population in Hong Kong. But 100 years ago, it's only less than 1%.
Oh, wow. So 15%, that makes it the number one religion?
Yeah, because the other religion, traditional religion, 13%, and the Buddhism 13%, and then other religion and other some people don't have religion, but the majority in terms of religion is Christianity in Hong Kong.
Really interesting. So 15% is the majority percentage, and that is the Christian worldview. That's really interesting. So you said 100 years ago it was only 1% who identified as Christian. Now we've got 15%. How did we see the change, or what prompted the change?
Yeah, when I, as my experience and study the history, that because at the beginning, people misunderstand the Christian faith. They thought it's a foreigner, a Westerner. Jesus Christ is a foreigner. However, when the missionary bring in the message of Christ, which will bring people the love, the hope, and the faith, and not only by human word, but witness for Christ. So, for example, they bring in the Western medicine. Although Hong Kong, long time ago, 100 years ago, even now they have a Chinese medicine, but for important diseases like need surgery and need a special medicine, then they need Western medicine, and the missionary bring in the medicine to help to care for people, so that a lot of people get into the hospital, not only get physically healing, but hear the message of Christ, the good news about Jesus Christ, bring them to the real faith. Right. So that in that case, more people is believing in Jesus during the last 100 years or so.
Right. Oh, I love that. So what you're saying then is that because of the missionaries who brought Western medicine and who brought this love and care for people, that the people in Hong Kong were now open to receiving Christ. And now we've got 15% who identifies. So that's wonderful. And I think that's very encouraging for anyone who is on the mission field, knowing that what you were saying, it's not only the word, but the works, the action behind that, that motivates people to explore worldviews maybe they weren't going to explore. So in the mission field, one of the things that I think is important is to kind of establish some common ground with the people
Right.
you're interacting with. So what are some commonalities between Christianity and Eastern religions that one can use to kind of have some talking points?
Yeah, in Hong Kong, just like in other Chinese culture, is very much influenced by the Confucius teaching, which emphasize on education and family value and respect the leader or the senior. So this can be a common ground because the missionary not only open hospital, but the school, elementary school, high school and college have a Christian background. They find that the school from the Christian background train the student to be one of the top student, and the parent really don't mind as long as you have a good education. So they send their kid to the Christian related school, and so this is a common ground because Confucius emphasize on education. Right. So when you bring in the good education system as a testimony of the Christian faith, it's very helpful. And eventually the student in the high school or even college, they listen to the gospel. A lot of them become Christian, and they turn around, become a teacher, and help other students. So this is, I think, is one of the common ground. The other one is the family value. As you know, I mean, basically the East culture very emphasized to honor your parent. And in the Bible, the Ten Commandments, one of the commandments is emphasize the honor your parent. This can be a common ground. We both value our parent because that's our Creator want us to honor our parent. So this can be one of the common ground.
I love that. So the common ground that we can find between Christianity and specifically Confucianism would be the importance of education and the importance of family values. So I think that's a great way to kind of connect with people and be able to, just have that common ground and start from there. Of course, there are a bunch of distinctions between Christianity and Eastern religions, but I think that it's important to establish that common ground.
Right. Nowadays, beside the common ground we share about, it is the science can be a common ground because science no boundary, and basically we can. Based on, for example, RTB resources to share, not only in Hong Kong, but other countries, that, hey, there's a creator. You look at the wonder of this universe, whether from the solar system, the galaxy, all this is in agreement with what the Bible tells us about the creation story. But more than that, of course, the message of love from Jesus Christ. That is the focus point we want to share to everyone, that there is hope with the confusion. The people mix up with idea, human value. So the message of Christ, bringing love and faith and hope is very important during this current nowadays situation.
Right. No, thank you so much. I think that is very, very helpful to just also point to exploring science and exploring our creation and who our creator is. So thank you so much for that. There's plenty to unpack here. So I want to encourage our viewers and our listeners, if you want to hear more from Dr. Alan Tai, visit his website, scienceandlife.org, and you can also visit reasons.org and search for Alan Tai.
A recent Pew survey discovered that 73% of people who never attend church or seldom attend church see conflict between science and the Christian faith. But the question is that necessarily the case? Is there truly conflict between science and Christianity? I'm joined today by Dr. Cynthia Cheung, who's an astrophysicist, and a Christian who's going to help unpack this question. Dr. Cheung, I think many people might be surprised to discover that it was a Christian worldview that laid the foundation for the emergence of modern science. And so I'd like to get your perspective on just how important the Christian worldview is for science, not only because you are a scientist and a Christian, but also because you come from a Chinese background and you have familiarity with Eastern religions and the Eastern worldview. So what is unique about Christianity that laid the foundation for science?
I came from a very different culture. I was brought up in really a Chinese culture. And I often wonder, why science did not fully develop in China, whereas a lot of the initial technologies like printing, like the explosives, geometry, all these things had the initial development in China, but never flourished and blossomed like in the West. And I came to the conclusion was that partly the culture didn't encourage the kind of development, and partly it was because the philosophical thinking. In Christianity, we believe that the world was created by a creator and everything was good. So we have this foundation to actually search and discover the nice things that God has created for us. So it's okay to actually explore and discover the physical world. Whereas in the East, in the Eastern philosophies, the perception of reality is much less objective. People look at physical things as if they may not be real. Because, for example, in Buddhism, Buddhism addressed a lot of suffering because the Chinese, a lot of East Asian countries went through a lot of suffering. So they want to address the question of suffering. And they think suffering is due to a lot of desire for physical things. And so they essentially want to do away with physical things and essentially empty ourselves of the desires of the physical things and say if you don't perceive them as real existence, there's no more of this kind of desire, and so you won't suffer. So the end result is that they want to empty themselves of all these, so they don't want to even touch the physical things. And so ultimately, they just let everything be, and nobody would have the incentive to actually go and discover and explore the world. They went inward and just go into the inner self to discover and try to be connected to this mystic force outside of themselves so that they would not be suffered because of these physical things. So it actually affected the entire development of the technology and the science. And in the ultimate thing is that, the country as a whole actually did not, advance. And a lot of human suffering resulted in that. Like there's no development in medicine and a lot of scientific technology which help the whole world nowadays. And so it's very interesting. The more I look into it, the more I think, the cultural thinking, the idea of how you perceive the world is very important. If you don't have that foundation and say it's okay to actually discover and look at the world as something real and something that could be studied objectively, you would not go into it.
Yeah, well, of course, now today, science is very important in China and other countries in the East. So what's going on there?
They wanted to catch up with the Western world. They all of a sudden discover that, you just concentrate on philosophy and literature and humanities. That's not good enough. And so when I was growing up, anybody who's any good has to go into science technology. We're not allowed to go into literature, arts, and the things because, because we are backwards because we have been only concentrating on the old things. So they encourage us. There's a very strong impetus for us to go into science technology. All my brothers and sisters, all my schoolmates, almost invariably, they study science and technology.
So it's really the influence of the West is what you're saying that is shaping the viewpoint that science is important in countries like China. Yeah, because they see how advanced like America, the West is compared to they're more backward, and I say the developing countries. And they see technology being the drivers. And when they came to the United States or the Western world, they all of a sudden see, why. They always ask why. And a lot of times we tell them, you know why? Because there's fundamental difference. It's not just a religion. It's something that affects the worldview, and because we know the true God who gives us this view of how we should explore the world that he has created. And these are laws that he has set out in the beginning. If you discover what he has done, you can utilize it for the betterment of mankind.
Hello, Jeff Zwerink. Welcome to Science Faith Connection, the segment of our show where we look at important scientific truth and see how they relate to the truth of Christianity. Today I'm joined by the founder and former president of Reasons to Believe, Dr. Hugh Ross, and we're going to ask the question of whether science can help evaluate the truth of a religion. Hugh, it's good to have you here today.
Well, thank you.
I mean, there's part of this that I know your answer is going to be yes, because I know looking at the various world religions scientifically was part of how you came to know Christ.
It was.
But I really just want to kind of open it up for you and let you explain, how did you investigate that, or why did you think science could weigh in on this question?
Well, first of all, it was my science, especially my astronomy and physics studies, that convinced me there had to be a beginning to the universe. And if there's a beginning, there has to be a beginner. So I began to say, hey, I need to find this cosmic beginner. Mm-hmm. I was not raised in a Christian home or a Christian neighborhood, didn't really know how to begin that search. So I said, hey, I'm going to look at Immanuel Kant and René Descartes. And they had some interesting things to say, but it just wasn't answering my questions. And then I began to look at the world's holy books. But I made a commitment that when I began to go through the world's holy books, I would put each of them in the best possible interpretive light. But when I did that with the Quran, the Hindu Vedas, the Buddhist commentaries, Zoroastrianism, Baha'i, etc., I discovered even when you interpret their writings in the best possible interpretive light, you can demonstrate that there are serious errors when they address geography, science, and history.
So I want to get at that, because I think that's rare in today's environment, at least, to put the other person's argument or the other person or a position in the best possible light. It seems like a lot of things there today are just, how ludicrous can I make the other position sound? Why did you come to that approach? And I mean, what motivated that, and how did that influence your results?
Well, I kind of felt that, hey, you can take any book and put it in the worst possible interpretive light and say, hey, this is nonsense. Mm-hmm. And it's like, hey, that's not going to show you what's true or what's not true. Let's put it in the best possible interpretive light and see what you get. And I felt, if a book fails the test, when you put it in the best possible interpretive light, then, hey, okay, it's appropriate to dismiss that as a pathway to truth.
So it seems like that's kind of similar to how we approach scientific investigations.
Sure.
It's not like, can I arrange things so that this kind of works out? As you have to test things fairly extensively, and it seems like putting things in the best possible light is part of that good scientific testing.
It is. I mean, that's how we do scientific research. I mean, if you try to put your model in the best possible interpretive light, and everything you try fails, and things get worse and worse as you learn more and more, you say, maybe this is the incorrect model. But if you're finding you're making headway, hey, we're actually understanding things a little more detail, we're answering more questions, we're resolving anomalies, that's a good clue you're on the pathway to truth. And and I did finally pick up a Bible. It wasn't that I found a book that was completely free of anomalies. I'll tell you, there are a lot of passages. There still are passages in the Bible I don't understand. But I put it to the test on what is clear and what is understandable. And this God that created the universe, what we see in the universe, what we see in science, is complete consistency and harmony. So you don't get physics contradicting biology or geology. We do see that it seems to be governed by a single mind, a single purpose, a single creator. So I looked for those same characteristics in the books. I said, if this book is really inspired by the one that created the universe, it's going to reveal the same attributes that we see when we study the record of nature. And so I began to look for what I thought, well, when we humans write something, we're imperfect, we don't know everything. You're going to be able to find mistakes. Mm-hmm. You're going to be able to find errors. So I began to look for errors, provable errors, not probable errors, but provable errors. And once I found maybe a dozen provable errors in, say, a claimed holy book, I would say, okay, this is something that humans invented. It's not something that came from the creator of the universe.
Can you give a couple of examples? I mean, obviously, this was a fairly extensive endeavor you took, but what were some of the things that you would put in the class of provable errors in various of the religious texts?
Well, probably, the first thing I really looked at was Hinduism. They have this enormous set of holy books called the Vedas. Mm-hmm. But looking at that, 'cause I knew Hinduism was based on this idea of reincarnation. So I said, okay, where does this come from? And what I discovered was it's based on the fundamental principle that the universe reincarnates. If the universe reincarnates, Hinduism says everything reincarnates. But when you look at the Hindu Vedas, that's one place where it gets specific. It says the universe goes through these cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, and the period is 4.32 billion years. Well,
that specifically?
It's that specific.
Wow, okay.
So I said, well, I know that number is not correct. But I also had friends who were studying astronomy like I was, and they said, hey, Hugh, it gets it to within an order of magnitude. The real number is 10 to 20 billion. It got it within the ballpark. But I said, we still know that 4.32 isn't correct. Moreover, we know that we can't come up with a physical mechanism that could rebound the universe in the way the Hindus claim. I says, we can measure the entropy of the universe, and it's about a factor of 100 million times too high to support Hindu theology. And that wasn't the only example. The other thing I noticed, and I saw this in a lot of the whole non-biblical holy books, the language is highly repetitive and highly vague. And that immediately raised my suspicion. It's like this book is trying to prove to me that it's spiritual, but it's trying too hard to prove to me that it's spiritual. Okay. And I said, that's what a human author would do if they're trying to persuade you this is some kind of spiritually true book. When I picked up the Bible, I didn't see any of that esoteric, spiritual, repetitious, vague language. So I noticed that as a difference right away. The other thing I noticed is it wasn't vague about describing attributes of history, geography, and science. Moreover, it predicted future scientific discoveries and future historical events. And I said, I can put this to the test.
So what are some of the things, just in the last couple of minutes we have here, what were some of the bigger points that the Bible made that you said, yes, I can find alignment between that and what the scientific record says? And what were some of the predictions that you thought were most profound?
Well, I like to start at page 1 of books. So right on page 1 of the Bible is the account of creation, and it's a chronology. God does this in a sequence of 6 creation days. And so I carefully examine the sequence of events, recognize everything is in the correct chronological order, and I carefully look for things that I could prove are wrong. And I recognize, okay, this is not in English. I got to be careful not to overinterpret the English. But I realize everything seems to be correctly described in the correct chronological order. And I was unable to find any other creation text in any other religious text that got anywhere close to that degree of accuracy. The Bible stood alone, getting everything in the right order, everything correctly described. I realized I was way beyond the science of Moses. So that was one piece of evidence that told me maybe this really is inspired by the one that did all the deeds.
Last question, and a quick answer. What do you find as one of the most interesting predictions that you have found to be true in our scientific studies that the Bible has made?
Well, what impressed me, and this is before I became a Christian, the Bible talks about the universe having a beginning, and includes the beginning of space and time itself. And I was living at a time when astronomers and physicists were actually proving that point through Big Bang cosmology and the theory of general relativity, that the laws of physics don't change, and that one of those laws is a pervasive law of decay. And I said, that again is way beyond the science of the original Bible authors.
Well, thanks, Hugh. I really appreciate your comments. When we look at Scripture, it actually says to look at creation to see how it behaves, that actually helps us understand. So we would expect Christianity to have this alignment between what God reveals in His Scripture and what God has revealed in creation. And as Hugh's describing, they line up very well. In fact, that gives us a powerful tool to go out and spread the gospel. I would encourage you to go to reasons.org and check out Hugh's book on this, Always Be Ready. It's a great resource for seeing how Hugh has used these scientific discoveries to spread the gospel, how you can be more convinced the gospel is true, and how you can go spread it as well.
We hope this episode has helped equip you to share your faith with compassion and confidence.
And I think it's really helpful to be able to have some talking points as you talk with people from different worldviews, like how to find some common ground. I really like approaching conversations, finding common ground as opposed to focusing on differences. So I hope that this episode has helped equip people to do that. And don't forget, subscribe to the show and find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at 2819 Show. We'd love to hear your thoughts and maybe hear what you think about engaging different worldviews.
Right. And if you would like the audio version of the show, you can find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or most major podcast services. Just search Reasons to Believe Podcast.
See you next week.
See ya.